Let's call the meeting to order. Come out of recess for this meeting. And realize this, Bob made an interesting point on the Chapter 70 money. The increase of Chapter 70 money from last year to this year is just $19,890, which is $30 per student for 663 students. That's the minimum. That's the minimum that they are required to raise the income from one year to the next by. So we got the minimum increase. I suppose a lot of districts get minimum increase. Okay, the object. Go ahead, Bob.
One of the reasons that occurs is that.
Bob, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
You need to be a little louder or speak into the mic better or just turn your volume up a little bit.
It's fine on mine. I turned my volume up. My speaker.
Okay, well, talk in.
Can you hear me any better?
That's much better.
I haven't moved. I'm 1 foot away from my tablet.
Okay. Well, for whatever reason, I can hear you a lot better.
Okay. I'm pretty certain of what I'm going to say, okay? The Granby is not likely to get any increase of any substantial amount in Chapter 70 because there's a thing in the Chapter 70 formula that's called the hold harmless provision. And it was set up so that communities wouldn't get a drop in Chapter 78, particularly when the population of the schools declined.
I see.
So since we had such a large decline, we got a lot of hold harmless, or let's say we have to build up the ability to get additional money. But it's, to my way of thinking, it's not likely due to the fact that there's so many kids that have moved out of the system.
The $30 per student is students who are residents of Granby, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we have more students in there. Okay.
Hey, just quickly, do we know how many students live in Granby versus how many are attending schools in the Granby district?
Well, if the Chapter 70 increase is based on $30 a student, then that would mean that there are 663 students.
Right. But we may have more school-age students than 663.
Yes, some of them go to other schools. We have and there are more students in the schools that are. Is that what you mean? There are more students in the school.
I mean, do we really have 900 school-age students living in Granby, but only 663 attend Granby schools? Or that's what I'm trying to figure out. What is our rate of, or the number of students that have chosen to go to school outside of Granby?
I don't know. Let's see. School choice out for Granby is. Let's figure. School choice out for Granby is 273,282.
You mean dollars?
Dollars. So that is 5,000 per student. That's roughly 200 and.
Divided by 5,000 is what you're saying?
Yeah, roughly. So that's roughly what, 50 something, 50 students or so, 55 students.
So we only have like 700 school age.
Yeah, 715 maybe.
Now?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, school sizes are way down.
Yep. Okay.
And at one time, it was like 1,500. I mean, that's going way, way back though, probably back when Westover was a full-time Air Force base rather than a reserve base.
Oh, yeah. Well, my brother graduated in a class of 77. There were 146, 147 students.
When I used to go to meetings and talk with people on finance committees and some other officials in other towns, and told them about our school system, about how many students were in it, and what size of Granby was. They were all just amazed that there were so many students from a town our size in the school system. None of the others seem to have that problem of such an overwhelming portion of the population being school aged.
Okay.
So, that's not the case. That's not the case these days. Did you get a chance to look at any of the long document that I sent?
You mean draft 2?
No,
Incoming broadcast. It says, with this computer,
it's called Draft 1. It's the FinCom Fiscal Year 2023 ATM booklet statement, Draft 1. I sent out just a piece of the new stuff as drafts 1 and 2, but just last night I sent out another document that is a little more than that. It's opening overview section, and then a kind of an outline of the middle section, which I want to talk to you about, whether we even need to have it. And then I melded together some writing that Bob did on the last overview, on the last portion, and I put in, added it to mine. So did you get that email?
Can you hold on? I'm checking.
Yeah, let me,
Do you know about what time you sent it?
yeah, just
20 minutes past 5.
Oh, okay. Then that's why I didn't see it, because I haven't checked my email since last.
no, this morning.
This morning, 20 after
Oh,
5.
this morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, John was like a college kid pulling an all-nighter.
Hey, I remember those days.
This was 5:20 a.m.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that happened was I got curious about this free cash and the stabilization fund. So I was looking over this stabilization fund money and realizing we had lost quite a bit of stabilization fund money. So I started going back over what had happened in the intermediary years, and I finally just hit upon this simple approach of using to gauge somewhat of our expending by looking at, I put together 10 years of how much we had in free cash to use in the following year, 2 years actually, hence. And then added up what was in the stabilization funds and projected out stabilization funds to next July 1st. And didn't write down all the intermediate numbers, but I wrote down a couple of them, and then took a look at what happened over 10 years. But what really happened over the last 8 years was just, it was just mind boggling. And that's the other document that, that's the other document that I sent together with the,
Okay, you're talking a decade of free cash, and that's the that's the spreadsheet,
Yes.
correct?
yeah.
Okay, I have that.
Yeah, because that's the thing that shows that that we've had an average of about $1.5 million of free cash a year for 8 years, but not only have we not used that to add the amount of stabilization funds we've had, we've actually reduced the stabilization funds by about $3 million. Enough per year that if that spending pattern continues in 7 years, we run out of stabilization fund money. And it's a combination of increasing operations for some departments and capital items. But and also the other thing was that fiscal year 2020, when the pandemic started, we were told during that fiscal year that the state was going to cut its funds by 20% is what the usual figure was. It was told by virtually everybody. So we couldn't count on any state funds. And we subsidized operations across the board by over $1 million. Then the state came through with the money after all. So that's, I think, been the principal reason why the free cash is up so high this year compared to what it had been. It's because after telling everybody that there was no money available from the state to hand out to cities and towns, they found the money someplace and handed it out to cities and towns. Plus, I'm not sure what the effect is of federal funds that we received in between. I know federal funds were used primarily for you to do things that you wouldn't have done otherwise. For example, buying masking equipment, or whether it was used to just offset or be used instead of your tax dollars and other funds or regular operations. To try to find out a little more about that, how much in federal funds we received and what they were used for. That could well have contributed to the increase in free cash.
I don't think so.
No.
No, because
Okay.
what it would be used for would be stuff that we wouldn't have normally been buying to begin with.
And that's what my first statement was. It could be that the funds we got were used for those purposes, but I don't know whether it's personnel or equipment or what.
Yeah, there haven't been any town meetings to vote to do anything, so
Yeah.
I wonder whether you could supplement somebody's budget with federal money without anybody knowing about it. Maybe you can, I don't know. I have no idea what the rules are for using any of those funds.
I thought for private businesses, they could essentially keep people on the payroll, what the stated purpose was. But if the business didn't actually need that, they could still use it for payroll and and not spend their other money.
I don't think there was any provision in any of the funding, though, that governments were able to take advantage of that.
Yeah. It's it was too bad we didn't have usual special town meetings in the last couple of years. We found out a little more information about some of these things.
Yeah.
Anyway, Joe, have you had time to look at anything?
Yeah, I just finished looking at the spreadsheet. I've looked at the overviews. Are we supposed to be on draft 1 or draft 2?
Draft 1. I started.
Yeah, we're probably on draft 3.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I printed off draft 1. Okay.
This one is titled draft 1 in big bold letters and dated.
It's Joe. When you
Because
said
I've also printed off draft 2 from the other.
But that's older than draft 1.
yeah,
Okay, that's older than draft 1. Okay.
yeah, I just went draft 1, 4/25/2022. Big bold letters on top.
Let's be draft 1 of the whole thing, right? Whereas the other one was draft 1 and 2 of.
Joe, look up Joe.
No, I have that.
Okay.
I printed all of that out. I'm looking at that now and getting rid of the others.
So the overview is just basically what it's always been. I'm going to add to that figures that's give the actual increase in school choice funds. And I can do that as, let's see, we gave the percentage increase for Granby as total as a percent, but without a dollar amount. Maybe I'll just do the same thing for the schools. State aid for the schools, school choice funds is projected to increase by, I think it's by like 0.7%, something small. And then say that the school choice funds, the Chapter 70 funds have increased by the minimum required by the state. And I can give a figure for that. I can give a figure for that one. Bob, does that sound all right? Give percentage increases?
Yeah.
I I went with I went with a percentage in the total fund state aid to Granby because with the inflation rate at the end of March running at 8.5%, it's such a contrast to what the inflation rate is. Help get across the idea that we could be we're heading for some relatively difficult times.
You know, I was reading that there's a federal bond, an I bond or something that's tied to the inflation rate. So that's what its interest earning is. So I guess if we have high inflation, there's your conservative investment, you know, because it's supposed to pay out minus 1% to the inflation rate. So. Okay, I just finished the considerations for the future, so I'm fine with it.
Okay, I may take out one sentence in there. It maybe the tone is a little different than the rest of it. There's a halfway down the page, or the third last paragraph on the page of considerations for the future. The opening sentence of if that doesn't get the attention of taxpayers, this will.
What, you're going to take that sentence out?
Yeah, I'm thinking about taking that sentence out.
That wouldn't bother me at all. I've had a little bit of a hard time with that.
Okay. Well, I'm all for like rattling people up a little bit to like read further, you know, I mean, you know, because from my perspective, you know, a new school building, the school system is like a, you know, is a big focus. It's a big concern. Yeah, I think I would agree taking that sentence out also. And even though the numbers about how free cash have gone down, a lot of people are probably not really going to be able to relate to that. You know, what that means, I think they're going to glaze over it. If we look at so quote, if we look over the longer time frame of the last 8 years, the figures are chilling, including the extraordinary bump in free cash that just occurred. Granby's average free cash in the last 8 years has been 1.46 million a year. Despite that, the stabilization funds have decreased by an average of more than 370,000 a year.
Yeah, yeah. That was
From what number though, John? So if it's decreased 370,000 a year, are you implying that 8 years ago the stabilization fund was? Are we saying it was 3 million? Is that what we're saying?
that's the percentage we've lost that in 8 years. It's 3 million less than it was. It's not, the exact figure is $2,983,660 less than it was 8 years ago. At the
Wow.
end, projecting forward, it's going to be 2.5 million at the 2.5, 2.6 million at the end of next fiscal year. And 8 years ago, it was $5.6 million.
Okay.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
Yep.
3 million bucks in 8 years. But they're smaller. I mean, we've added money in and taken money out.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that we've taken it out at a very good clip.
Can I pull out the new banner? Restore the landfill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Revive it, really. Okay. Okay, I get it.
All right.
I'm
well,
just saying that it would be interesting for the townspeople to see that 8 years ago the number was 5 million, and today the number is 2 million, etc. You know, as opposed to just showing 370,000 a year, because then I have to do the math. There I can give them two numbers and they can see that, hey, we've depleted the fund by 3 million. Even though we've averaged 1.46 million in free cash for each of those years. That's what you're saying, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And not only have we not saved any of it.
Yeah, we've spent it.
We've been eating. We not only we spend all of that, we've been eating into the rainy day funds by 370,000.
So technically, if we had free cash at 1.46 million times 10 year or 8 years, we've spent that amount of free cash money plus 3 million in stabilization to get down to a total reserve of under 3 million. Could you put it that way? Or am I muddying up the waters because the way I'm reading it is, hey, 1.46 million times 8 is what, $12 million or something, roughly. And so the way I would think about this would be, we've spent all that free cash, that 12 million, plus we've depleted 3 million out of stabilization. Or is that overstating it? Because we take free cash every year and we put it in the stabilization. I'm just looking at the gross number and saying, it seems to me that between free cash and stabilization, we've spent an extra $15 million in 8 years.
Almost. Now,
Okay.
the reason I hesitate to do that is that a couple of times in the last few years, including I think last year, we wrote up in the booklet exactly how we're doing the budgeting. That is, the town budgets every year to spend we hope within about $1 to $1.5 million of what the income is and the underspending and stuff like that. Unknown sources. And then we always have a spring meeting. And in a spring meeting, then we allocate that money for basically cleaning up the budget at the end of the year. And that money is typically used for capital projects. There's some like over expenditures in every year, new things which pop up during the year, so that not everything that you're going to do in the following year, year and a half has to be known by the end of March in the previous year. But as things pop up, and any government that we're subject to wants to make changes or offer opportunities, there's a way to do that. So we always spend the money, but we always, in past years, up until these last 8 years, we've always been able to take some of the money and put it away and build a stabilization funds up, so that for a rainy day it can be used. But now look, it's been raining constantly. It's not a rainy day. We've had 8 years of rain.
How about simplifying it and calling it what it is? Over the last 8 years, we've spent $370,000 a year more than we have revenue. Because that's forgetting how it got into this account or that account or whatever. There's nothing left other than whatever's in the stabilization fund. So that's really all spending in excess of revenue.
Yeah, but we've spent more than 370,000 a year.
Well, we had revenue for the other.
Right.
I can do that. So after the sentence, despite that, stabilization funds have decreased by an average of more than 370,000 a year. Another way of saying this is that for the last 8 years, we've averaged 370,000 a year more in expenditures than we have in income from all sources.
Then that sounds bad, because I think everybody understands that.
I'd love to say, pick your favorite department to take 370,000 away from, but we can't do that.
Well, we'll get a roulette wheel.
You gotta be careful. Somebody may say, well, you guys aren't recommending to not spend it.
No,
We'll
we're
have a
not.
roulette wheel at our next charter day. It'll be they're gonna have to spend money to do to spin the wheel, on where you cut the budget. So
We have a much bigger problem this year than just fighting departments for the money that they want to spend.
right.
We don't want you to think that we're arguing just for this year's budget or any one department. We're telling you that Granby as a town has potentially got a big problem. There's no end in sight for the requests to expand the scope of departments. And just leave it at that, So we're not putting up big fights on these other things.
No.
And we're giving the schools an extra $600,000 this year. If we stand up at the budget and say, well, it's written in the booklet that we're going to propose such and such, but I'm here to tell you we're going to propose $600,000 less than that. I don't think it'd do any good.
No.
I don't think it'd do any good.
We just voted at the town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if things keep going the way they're going, then we're going to reach a point in about 7 years where we're going to allocate more money than we have income and have no stabilization funds to pay for it.
So how many years do I have before I have to sell my house? No, I'm just kidding.
At this rate, 7 years.
Well, no, I don't know, John. 7 years, that's without, if inflation hangs around at 8%, we're gonna get there.
Less. Yeah, it's gonna be less. Well, anyway.
So if you want to sell your house, Joe, you better think about putting it on the market in about 3 years.
No, I really don't want to sell my house. I'm a water person, so when I visit all my friends and relatives in Florida and California and how much they pay for bottled water, and I just go to my well, that's a selling advantage to me. So anyway.
Yeah, the 7 years is if the patterns continue exactly. But
Okay.
as long as the money's there, if people start asking for more money, most of our expenditures is to pay people to do things.
Okay, so let me ask this question, because Bob, we were all back around that year back in the 90s when we had negative free cash. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Okay, so, and I'm just wondering how we dealt with that, or was that just a mistake and the money wasn't so significant that we had to do anything special to make it up? So, I just look at a certain point where we're going to hit that negative free cash again limit, and that'll be the barrier that'll probably be the thing that will jolt everybody awake again to, once we're in total crisis mode, so.
I can't remember how we got negative free cash. I mean, I can think of ways that it could occur, but I don't remember the specifics.
I just remember that because that was one of the first years I was on the finance committee back in those days. And I don't know who was, wasn't there, I can't remember the woman that was sort of in charge of the finance committee then. I'm trying to remember her name. So, but anyway.
Gussie.
Pardon?
Gussie Pogulski, probably.
Okay.
I think she's the only female that's been in charge of the finance committee.
Okay. But anyway.
One way would be if one of the factors that gets into the free cash calculation is the change in your real estate taxes receivable.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, if you had bad unemployment and high inflation and people didn't pay their taxes, it could increase. On the other hand, the moment that I can't imagine that happening at the moment because of the fact that we don't allocate all of our anticipated revenue into the tax rate or into the expenditures each year. So even though we do it as free cash, it's sort of a backstop in the event that something crazy happens in the course of the year.
Yeah, because there is a real use for stabilization funds. If there's a sudden change in 1 year in your fortunes, you've got something there that can enable you to keep exactly the same kind of lifestyle, with the idea that you can only do that for a short while, and then you have to go back to, over some period of time, building your cash reserves back up. But 8 years seems to me to be an awfully long time to just keep taking money away from your reserves and asking when is it going to do it. The reserve that we have here in stabilization funds is half the percentage of the budget that it was. Actually, probably more than that, because we had 6 million, we now have 3 million in rough terms, but the budget has grown in 8 years, grown by quite a bit. If we had kept it at 6 million, it would be a smaller percentage of the budget already as a buffer, because the budget has grown by a percentage. If you've got a percentage that you're comfortable with for emergencies, and you don't grow it at the same percentage as you're growing your budget, you're basically spending money. All right, now my question is this: in the past years, we've had a whole page, middle section, where we talk about some things going on in the budget. Let me give you some examples of that. We talk about what the guidelines for the budget are, and I think probably ought to throw that on in. Talk about total amount spent on schools for all things. The retired teachers' health care, we're throwing in. In years where something unusual has happened with one of the labor union contracts, we put in some comments about that. So all that stuff is interesting, but what I wonder is if this year we should just kind of minimize that, and because we've got this very long document about the considerations for the future, and just make that the point of the document.
Hey, I'm in agreement.
You know, we can always go back in future years and do the same kind of boilerplate stuff, but you know, at some point we've been saying over and over, you know, the town is going to have to make some choices, and the town has made the choice to elect to continue to outspend its income. But no, that's not exactly what we had in mind as the most prudent course. Is that your choice is, well, you're going to keep overspending. But you know, when you're down to look at, I mean, look back 7 years ago, fiscal year 16. That's the difference between now and when, if this pattern continues, we run out of money. Looking back to fiscal 16, that's not a long time. 7 years is not a long time. I mean, look at the last 2 years have gone by so fast. You know, 2.5 since everything was shut down, February of 2020. That's just a very, very short amount of time in the financial world. Okay, well, I'll work on putting a few things together for the middle piece and send it back out to you, and then tomorrow I'll turn it on into Chris. Get me some comments, any comments that you have about it tomorrow, and then I'll pass it on. But we'll go with that.
Okay.
I still want to talk about some conversation.
Okay. All right. What did I mean by that? I think that's was a leftover from another phrasing of that section. All right. The question, Joe, is this: on the last page, on the last page, the first full paragraph at the top of that page, which follows our saying prudent course of action, we study all possible alternatives, and we put some money and there's some money in the board of selectmen's budget to hire an outside professional consultant to help with this study for Granby. And then we say, then I got some conversation among taxpayers and polling of taxpayers to quickly sort out the issue of whether a 10% debt exclusion override is feasible. And I think what I was trying to say is that I hope that one of the things that's done while we're looking at alternatives for the educational philosophy in Granby is that we actually are able to do some scientific polling of taxpayers and listen to what taxpayers have to say. Because if that's not done, and all along people are saying, I don't care how good this is. We're not going to raise taxes by 10%. I'm just not going to vote to raise taxes by 10%. Then not only do we not get a new school built, but the $3 million that it would cost us, we're told, to do a feasibility study will not be reimbursed at all by the state. So instead of us costing us $1.5 million, we have to pay the $3 million, which for anybody paying attention realizes the entire sum of money within the stabilization funds right now, in all three stabilization funds. And so it'd just be the height of folly to even start on a study unless we were absolutely certain that the town was going to cough up an extra 10% property taxes. And if they're not going to do that, then we'd know right from the beginning that whatever it is going to be studied is going to have to be smaller, much smaller in scope.
Well, I think we should, when does the next tax bill go out? In the mail? Because you could piggyback a survey.
No, that's not a scientific survey. That's not a scientific survey. Any survey where you send things out and let people select whether or not to answer it is not a scientific survey. That's as bad as what the letter that went out to the towns was. That is not the way to do it. You don't find out anything that's useful to you except by pure luck.
Well, then I guess I got lucky one time, John.
Yeah. No,
When I did the, when we were working on, converting from the landfill and we did a survey, we had 32% of the households respond to the survey. So, but I agree. I mean, let's do something scientific, but the question for Granby, what is scientific? Because the bottom line is, are you a voting age and are you a property owner? Even if you're not a property owner, most people in town are property owners. So, but I would agree. Let's do a survey.
So, Bob, is it the very idea of either the conversation or is it just the way it's phrased?
I don't know. Maybe a little of each. In the comments that I switched around, what I was basically trying to do, I mean, some of it was obviously the way I would express myself, but I wanted the finance committee to not be in the position of passing judgment on the project at this point in time, all right? And this sort of gets close to that because the way it's worded, it sort of sounds like you're trying to throw some cold water on the project, which maybe it needs, but when we had our original discussions after we met with Sullivan and Chris, we came up with the fact that we thought the feasibility study should be done as an override, right to start with, for that reason, to see if the taxpayers were willing to do it.
Well, won't it have to be? We don't have that much money we don't have that much money in the stabilization funds
For what?
to pay for a $3 million feasibility study.
Well, yeah, but we could borrow the money and pay it out over years and screw up the budget for the next so many years.
And you borrow money for that? I didn't think you could borrow money for something like that.
I don't know, I think you could. Yeah, because I think we borrowed for it the first time when we did East Meadow. I think you're allowed to borrow for plans for capital improvements, engineering work, that sort of stuff.
So what is the proposal?
Well, what we said, I think was just what she says is that we thought that the first a real test of interest in the taxpayers of raising their taxes would be if we only agreed to do a feasibility study if it was voted as an override, voted and paid for as an override by the town at a ballot box, not at a town meeting.
Just offhand, where you're mentioning ballot box, when the high school was turned down the first time, the vote at the town meeting was a majority in favor of the project. But it didn't reach 2/3. Just, not that that means anything, but I mean, that was not defeated by an override. That was defeated by the borrowing authorization. And the same would occur if we're to borrow the money here. It would be a 2/3 vote. And then if it was done as a debt exclusion, then you need obviously the separate override vote. The thing is that when I read it, I think your timing is that before we do anything, before we even consider a feasibility study, we ought to know whether the feasibility study would be approved. And my idea of the sequence of events is more that somebody has to make a determination on alternative ways to educate the kids, or however you want to call that. If it is that there is no regionalization and no other alternatives, then you're going right into you go to the feasibility study. On the other hand, what do you do if it comes back as regionalization is possible? It may still be that it isn't the proper solution to the problem. In other words, it's probably easy to say that we're backed into I say we, the finance committee, the town, whatever, everybody is backed into a corner if there's no regionalization opportunity. Other than freestanding temporary classrooms, which I personally feel would not be providing a good education. So I would think that without regionalization, we're in a position where the MSBA is probably the only answer to solving the condition of the high school. And I sort of think that at that moment in time is when you need to find out whether to spend the money on the feasibility study or is it not going to be voted. That's enough long-windedness for me.
So what you pointed out to me is that when I look at everything, and maybe what we should communicate is, to me, the most important next step, certainly from the school standpoint, is to hire that independent consultant and really determine what all of our options are. Because we shouldn't waste spending another penny on anything. And that would be something that we could get going, and hopefully that could be delivered. That should be able to be delivered within 3 to 6 months at the latest, because there's only going to be so many options. And then based on that, based on these options, then maybe we have to then start thinking about a feasibility study, because maybe coming out of that option, hey, we really don't have any options. It's looking more and more like we're going to have to find a way to build a new building, because that could be the conclusion. But I'm just saying that should be the next most important step over everything else that we're talking about here.
Well, I think I think there's more than that that's needed, because when we talked about it before, we said the first thing that has to be done is some realistic study of what options are. And that is the first thing. But part of that, I think that part of that is that, well, here's option A, B, C, D, whatever. And here's what the advantages of this is. here's what a disadvantage of this, here's what a probable cost is. And I find it very easy to conclude without doing a study at all that building a brand new high school with lots of courses and lots of classes and small sizes would be a very good thing for a town to be able to do, except that you can never afford to do it.
Yeah.
So exactly where do you reach the point? And for example, if one of the options, short of regionalization, is that, well, you're going to have to have a reduced curriculum because manpower costs are the biggest cost driving the schools, just like the biggest cost driving any operation. So the only way that you can tackle a manpower problem is by having fewer classes. So your school philosophy all of a sudden changes. You couldn't offer electives that would have just 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 kids in the class. Classes have to be a minimum size to even be considered being offered. You've got to redo how you approach extracurricular activities. You've got to pare way back on your administration. There are lots of things which would not be voluntarily brought up by anybody who was involved in the process, unless it were driven by someone who was forcing a certain kind of thinking that requires a monetary consideration as an offense around the whole thing. That this is not a project to say, well, this is great. We've got a blank sheet of paper. We're going to draw up all the ways that we could do education, and then we're going to sign the check that's on the last page of the blank piece of paper. That's not the way it works, because I don't think that no matter what happens, even if somebody came in and took over the school system, I don't think that a town can be forced to raise property taxes or anything.
They can't.
Well, but some of what you said, John, while it's financially, it's totally logical. It results in the dumbing down of America term from a number of years ago. Because when you're going to get rid of small classes, they're going to be the advanced courses. They aren't going to be the run-of-the-mill courses. So that what you're going to do is continue to provide an education, but it will be, I guess, what I would consider to be a mediocre education rather than a real good education.
Yeah, I was under the impression we don't even have AP classes.
Well, we have some. And when somebody says there's 3 kids in a class, those are AP classes.
Yep.
Because there aren't that many smart kids. But do we penalize them for the benefit of everything else? I mean, I don't know.
These are exactly the kind of questions which we can't answer.
Well,
we can't answer, but an appropriate study could do it. And when you say you have to keep class sizes up because you can't have as many personnel as you have, that may one way that you immediately might think of that is that if advanced placement elective courses by nature are small because there's so few kids in the school, then that's one thing that you got to think about. But just even if they're not advanced placement, but if you have a whole big curriculum, lots of courses that students can choose from, maybe you've got to cut that out. Maybe it's back to reading, writing, and arithmetic, in the worst possible scenario. And
yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. Well, one thing that
you don't know that until you get into somebody who actually takes a look at what are the possibilities even within the current education system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about Common Core or that, but one thing in what I've read is that, things are associated, so if you're forced to do this, maybe you can redefine public education in Granby in a way that is very attractive, because one of the things they talked about was basically like learning pods, because basically music and art and math sort of all go together, because there's geometry for art and stuff like this, and language pod, so you have an English language. So that was one of the things. Then you got a science pod, and then you got a social studies pod or something. so they were talking about approaching your public education from the perspective of there are types of courses that are interrelated and go together, and maybe without offering an extensive number of courses, but a certain core combination of courses, you could provide the kind of attractive education that parents are looking for and that would stimulate kids. Anyway, I'll be right back, guys.
Okay. Now,
Let me get my 2 cents worth in again.
excuse me?
Let me get my 2 cents worth in again.
Okay, okay.
I don't differ with the need for a study at all.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that as a finance committee, as an individual, trying to pass judgment on a project without looking at the alternatives is foolish. I mean, all you can do is leave money on the table. And I know, on the other hand, that if you ever do get a project on the table, it's going to be a Cadillac. It isn't going to be the low end stuff. It isn't going to be a used car. It's going to be the equivalent of a brand new car. But I think what bothered me, and I started out, was that we're dealing with an override right to start with. I think that's just one part of what has to be considered. I mean, and that's, if nobody wanted to merge with us or let us regionalize with them, whichever the proper way to word it would be, it's a somewhat different decision that we're going to be making. Then it's a question, to my way of thinking anyways, do you repair the building for God knows some fantastic amount of money? Or do you let the building sit the way it is? Or do you try to figure out how to piecemeal and do something to it? But I think what's bothering me is just trying to determine at this, what I would consider to be an early stage, whether or not it could eventually it could pass. Because we never need to get around to override regionalization.
They're listening to all that. I think I'm in agreement. We don't need this paragraph in at all. When the time comes for a study, these are the kinds of things that will be said, not just by the finance committee, but I think by a lot of people. That if you're going to do a study has to be thinking about X number of things. It's not a study to how do we build the best school. It's a study that looks at a lot of different things, and here's all the criteria that are going to have to go into the study, because these are the criteria people will use when they're choosing whether or not to participate in the solution to the study. So, and I do not, I took out other language where it from the wording of it, it looked like we were saying the finance committee wants the town to do this, and that's not what we're saying. We're saying that here's an option, and the option for the town, because the questions are going to get asked of the town, have to realistically take a look at certain kind of things. So what if we just got rid of that whole paragraph? We don't need to do polling of taxpayers, talk about it on here. That's something that can be discussed when you're trying to determine financial feasibility. Could contain a lot of different approaches.
Yeah, I have no,
Okay.
fine with me to take it out.
I'll just take that out. That's not a problem.
Maybe you could,
I'll just take it out. I'll just take it out.
no, I was wondering whether you could strengthen the paragraph before a little bit, which is dealing with the money in the selectmen's budget and doing a study right now. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that the fact that a letter was sent out to all the school systems, or that the particular letter that was sent out to all the school systems, may have put us behind the 8 ball. And
Yeah, that's why that's got to be. Towns have to know that that was premature, and that it's not a school system talking to a school system that determines what merger is. It's town talking to a town.
Yeah.
It's not school personnel or school students who vote on this ultimately. It's town personnel and two towns that vote on it.
But somehow or other, I believe that the selectmen are sort of caught not wanting to maybe force the issue of an independent individual. I don't know.
Well, that will be up to them. I think that, arguments will be made in the beginning as to what the outcome of that approach will be.
Yeah.
And someone's going to have to sit there and explain 7 years from now, how come we have no money?
Probably going to have to do that anyways. The schools have been probably the largest user of the stabilization funds for their shortfalls in their budget.
Right.
But Chris said he's got 3 or 4 years with allowing or being able to let them have 400,000, but that still leaves him 200,000 short, and that's going to escalate with inflation and wage increases. So the problem is not going to go away.
All right.
Yeah, I'm back.
We're done.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to take that short paragraph out. Just eliminate it. All right. Well, let me. I'll be up late tonight. I'll put together something in the middle section and get this around to everybody. And if you have any chance to look at it tomorrow morning and read it, I'd appreciate a comment back.
Okay.
How much sleep did you get last night?
Me?
Well,
No,
me,
John.
3 hours. 3 hours. 'Cause
3 hours?
I had a full schedule today with other things. It was basically 4:30 this afternoon when I got back today to take a look at it. I hoped I was going to have more time today, but other meetings just went on and on. So,
Well, remember, you have until the end of the week. I mean, it's not, you don't have
Yeah.
to pull a 4 o'clock in the morning job.
yeah, I'd rather save that time for any kind of last minute changes we make. I'd rather have the bulk of it done.
Okay, okay. So I guess I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn the meeting
No, recess
till
until,
tomorrow?
We don't have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow.
No. Oh, not adjourn, I'm sorry,
Well,
we can't continue this meeting? We can't continue?
Well, we don't have one scheduled. We can recess. I suppose we could recess and
Yeah,
schedule.
recess is what I meant, not adjourn, recess.
Um,
well, otherwise if we do that, you can't have another meeting until Thursday night.
If we recess,
No, if we adjourn.
right,
Because that-
no, but if we recess, but if I make a motion to recess, we could have another meeting tomorrow night, correct?
Or the night after, whenever.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll make a motion to recess.
Let's ask John what he wants the schedule to be.
well, I would hope we would wrap it up
Tomorrow. Right,
tonight.
tonight, oh,
And
okay,
just-
so what do we have to do to wrap it up?
Well, if it's possible to prove in principle the write-up containing the changes we've made to the stuff we've seen and the boilerplate additions that I would make for the short middle section of the document.
So moved.
In other words, we're approving the report now, subject to a little
Yeah.
latitude in your part
Yeah.
filling some stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so move.
Yeah.
Bob, can you second that?
Is there a second?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous.
Okay, then, we
And then-
can,
Should we just recess the meeting until you decide that we're gonna meet again to either adjourn the meeting or to take care of some additional business?
well, if we want to meet on Thursday evening, we can just adjourn and I'll ask Kathy to set another meeting for Thursday evening.
Okay, you're sure? Okay.
Well, because tomorrow's
Tuesday.
Tuesday. You need two full days. So, she can set a meeting for Thursday evening.
Okay,
How's
so
that
then I'll
sound?
make a motion to adjourn.
A second,
Bob?
Bob?
You
Motion,
need a second?
a second? Or would you
Okay.
rather? But
Bob
Bob,
is frozen.
you're frozen, Bob.
I know.
Okay, just say, okay.
What's your
So we
opinion on
need a second.
recess versus adjourn?
You want to post the meeting, adjourn is easier. Or
Okay,
cleaner, or whatever.
Well, then let's adjourn and post another meeting for Thursday, which we may or may not use.
okay, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.